about water and urban places. This is Ideanthro. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. And welcome back to another That's Like WSUD episode, where we take an idea or a concept that we've come across, heard about, or otherwise seen, and apply it back to water-sensitive urban design. In today's episode, we will be talking about the concept of zero-sum games and how they relate to maintenance budgets, getting money to fund the management of stormwater assets, water-sensitive city assets, and the like. To do this, we're first going to need to define what a zero-sum game is and what the opposite of zero-sum game is, and then decide whether or not we think that this maintenance asset management space and funding of it is a zero-sum game. And from there, we'll discuss its implications. So what's a zero-sum game? Essentially, a zero-sum game, this terminology comes from game theory, and it is any sort of game, competition, event where the participants' actions all add up. The positives and the negatives of any of their actions add up to zero. The best example I can give of this is eating a cake. So imagine you've got a cake, you've got 8 people around for dessert, you cut it up into 8 pieces, and I decide to take 2 of them. I get extra cake, and as a result, someone else has to miss out because there is a finite amount of cake. So the starting position is everyone should get 1 piece, but I take some extra by having 2, so I have an extra piece, and as a result, someone has to have 1 less piece. Or several people have to have half a piece, like 2 people have to have half a piece less each. The point is that the net when you add this all up together is you only have 1 cake, it's a fixed amount. That's a zero-sum game. The opposite of a zero-sum game is called a non-zero-sum game. Not the most exciting term in the world, but it is a game where the players' actions, positives and negatives, can be more or less than 0. And the best example that I can give you of this is very close to home. It is in fact this video. Because the players in this are me producing the video and you consuming the video. And in this instance, for me, yeah, sure, it takes me some energy to produce it, but I get a lot of benefits because I get to have interesting conversations with people, people comment on the videos and I learn stuff. So I get a net benefit out of this. I do have to spend some time, but I get a lot of benefit, so I get a net benefit. Now, if this is a zero-sum game, because I am getting a net benefit out of this, you should be losing. By watching this video, if this was a zero-sum game, you would be losing. But presumably, if you've got this far into the video, you're not insane and you are in fact benefiting from it. Hopefully. If you're not, turn off now. But if you are benefiting from it, that means that I'm benefiting and you're benefiting, and we're getting more benefit overall. It's non-zero sum. It hasn't added up together. So a zero-sum game is the cake where there is only a fixed amount of benefit, but this video is not, because by producing this video I'm creating greater overall benefit. It's non-zero sum. There could also be an action that creates greater overall negative. That would also be non-zero sum, but we're focusing on the positive side of this today. So having established what a zero-sum game is, let's ask ourselves, okay, does funding water-sensitive cities, funding stormwater management, is it a zero-sum game? Well, the answer in my opinion is it depends. It depends whether the overall pot of money available for maintenance or management is fixed, because that was the key differentiator here. The piece of cake was a fixed size. So is the overall pot of money for asset management, or the overall pot of money from which the money for asset management comes, fixed? Well, that does depend. But let me give you an example. Let's talk into this from a certain perspective initially. One of the things, at least in local government in Australia, and government in general, is that governments are very, very reticent to increase taxes. In the case of local governments, that would mean increasing rates. They really don't want to. A lot of governments have essentially a policy of not increasing rates any more than the inflation rate. So if that's the case, then the overall pot of money, if asset management is funded out of local government rates, and if overall rates are fixed, then at least in that overall council level, asset management is a zero-sum game. Now you could look at asset management itself and go, well, if we as asset management in general make a really good argument, we might be able to grow our asset management pot, and therefore stormwater might be able to grow its wedge within that pot. So therefore the asset management game might not be a zero-sum game, but it is still fitting within a broader zero-sum game if a local government has a policy of not increasing its overall rate base. So that, from my experience, is a fairly common policy. So from that point of view, I'm going to go and say, yeah, asset management and maintenance is a zero-sum game. It doesn't necessarily have to be. If you feel that you can influence that overall pot there, then it's not a zero-sum game. You could potentially increase that overall pot. But of course, then you need to look bigger and look at the whole of society and then go, okay, for the ratepayers who are paying into this, did they have a fixed overall amount of money? So you can see that this can just expand out and contract in. But the real question then becomes, okay, we need to focus in somewhere to understand the implications of this. And I think there's a reasonable argument that asset management, at least as far as funding asset management from local government rates goes, that it's a zero-sum game. The significance of that, as we looked at before with the cake, is that if one area increases its share, another area has to lose. I took 2 bits of cake instead of 1, someone else didn't get a bit of cake at all. So, local government, comes budget time, everyone's fighting to get their little bit of money, because this is what happens in a zero-sum game. People recognise, I want to get that, I need that, our area is really important, you should fund us, no, our area is really important. This is effectively what happens in the local government budget cycle. It might not be that obvious, but that is in effect what's happening, is the different departments then go and end up competing with each other for money. And a lot of time and effort gets put into these different departments competing for a fixed amount of money. And so, you have to ask yourself, well, if the overall amount of money is fixed, and say if I, as stormwater asset management guy, make an argument that says, hey look, stormwater asset management's really, really important, and say if I'm successful with getting that money, is that actually a good thing? For that to be a good thing, you have to accept that whatever lost out, didn't get funded because of this, that whatever didn't get funded was less important than stormwater getting funded. For that to be the case, you have to accept that potentially there's some unimportant stuff that local governments are doing. And maybe you think that that's the case, maybe you don't. But if you do think that the vast majority of stuff that local governments are doing is important, as I tend to, then you have to start to question, well, what's actually the point of fighting like this? Because overall, I'm not creating a net benefit. Overall, all I'm doing is getting a bit more pie for me and someone else is losing out. Some other areas not getting funded for a while, not being able to do the good stuff that they should be able to do. And then at some point, they're going to get their act together and they're going to make a more compelling argument about what they want to do. And someone else is going to lose money. And you just get this juggling of the balls where, depending on where you are in the cycle, what time it is, what government you've got in, different priorities are up and different priorities are down. It's really dysfunctional. I actually don't think it's a really sensible way to approach this. So what could we do instead? I am of the opinion that if we're accepting, at least for this exercise, that overall council budgets are a zero-sum game, and if we're accepting that the most of what councils do is important, and that there's not really a situation where going, I want more money for stormwater, and by the way, we can take it from there, and sweet, that doesn't matter at all, that for the most part, that actually doesn't exist. What really exists is, oh, more money for stormwater, less for that other important thing. Then we have to ask ourselves, okay, is it really worthwhile overall as a whole having this fight? Or should we be reframing this? And this is where this episode's about to come back round to my favorite topic of recent, doing more with less. The reality is, if you consider this to be a fixed overall pot, and you consider that it's not really acceptable to be going, oh, more stormwater at the expense of something else, then you come to only one of two conclusions. Either, if you want to do all your good stormwater stuff, you either have to make the pot bigger, or you have to find a way to do your stormwater stuff cheaper. I can't see another solution, given the situation that I've set up there, given the ifs and the buts that I've stated. I can't see another way around that right now. Now, you could look at this differently. You could say, well, actually, councils do lots of unimportant things. We should just stop doing them. And if that's your opinion, then fine. It makes completely logical sense to try and make an argument that we should do more stormwater in water sensitive cities and less of that other thing over there. You could also look at this from the point of view, as a lot of people are trying to do, and as I think there is a lot of sense in doing, this is the third option, which is to go, okay, how do we do sensible water and stormwater things that maybe cost more but save money elsewhere? That's the other way to do this, because then the overall pot doesn't change. It can be a zero-sum game, but we can have a situation where we're able to get more stormwater benefit for less cost elsewhere. A crackingly good example of this would be if you could create porous cities, so cities that soaked up lots of water to such an extent that you could save on piping costs in the minor drainage system. So in Australia, we have terminology of the minor and the major drainage system, which means that small-ish rain events up to a certain size are typically piped, and above that, there are dedicated overland flow paths for the larger events to flow down. So in a road, for example, there might be a pipe underneath the road which conveys the minor storm. It conveys the minor storm, so the small but regular events get conveyed through the pipe. But when it gets into a big storm, it is acceptable for surface water to run along the surface of the road. Conceivably, a situation where we had a really porous city, you could have that city to be porous enough that you would need smaller or possibly even no pipes in the minor drainage system. That would save money. That would be an example of doing more stormwater benefit but saving money elsewhere, doing more water sensitive cities benefit, which would have obvious environmental and urban cooling benefits potentially, for less money. So let's recap where this is. Zero-sum games are games where the net of the player's activities add to zero. It is a cake, there is a fixed amount of cake. If I take extra pieces, someone else is not getting them. In local government budgeting, what this means is there is a fixed budget because local governments have decided because politicians have decided that it's not popular with voters to increase rates. So there is a fixed rate base and different departments and different disciplines within councils are fighting for that money. If one gets more, another gets less. If that's the case, then you really have to accept one of three. I know I said two earlier, but actually three options here. Either, if you want to fund water sensitive cities management and stormwater management better, you either have to make the overall pie bigger, such that it could still be a zero-sum game at that point within that new bigger frame, but you definitely need to take the current zero-sum game and make it bigger. Alternatively, you have to figure out how to do more stormwater management with less money. So the pie, make the stormwater wedge either smaller or do more within its current wedge that you already have, or you have to find a way for the money that you are spending on stormwater in its wedge to be able to make another wedge do the same with less money so that the stormwater wedge can occupy its space. That would be the equivalent to me finding a way, this sounds ridiculous, this would be the equivalent to me finding a way, if I wanted an extra piece of cake, to find a way to make all the other bits of cake taste nicer so no one wanted as much of them. But of course, they'd all want more of them. So I'd have to make them all richer. I'd have to somehow magically make them all into mud cake. So they tasted better, but everyone else felt a little bit sick if they ate lots of it. And then I could eat my two wedges from there. Okay, that was a funny way to end that. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found that useful. I'd be really curious to know what you think. Leave us a comment below. But for now, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon.
Before you go, our best episodes come from your questions. This knowledge base, these discussions that are Ideanthro, improve with your contribution. So if there's a topic, an idea, a concept that you would like us to explore, come and ask us. You know where to find us. www.ideanthro.com/contact. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and that place you get your good podcasts from. You know where to find us. We look forward to hearing from you. We'll see you soon.